I never thought I'd be the kind of person who replayed someone's humiliation in my head like a favorite movie. But there's this one moment I keep going back to. My manager, red dress, champagne glass in hand, announcing to the whole office at the Christmas party, HR is giving me everything next year. And then the CEO's face changed. It was such a tiny shift. His smile froze, maybe half a second too long. But if you've ever worked in a big company, you know that look. It's the look someone gets right before they pull a plug you don't even know you're attached to. I was standing a few meters away, pretending to laugh at a joke, and I realized I wasn't nervous anymore. I was calm, because by then all I had to do was watch what I'd already started roll forward. To explain how we got there, I need to go back a couple of months, to when I still thought keeping my head down would save me. I work in a mid-sized tech company, not a FO-ing, but big enough to have a proper HR department, glossy diversity posters, and those fake plants no one waters. I'm a senior analyst in operations, the guy who cleans up the numbers after everyone else has had their fun. My manager, let's call her Melissa, had been there longer than almost anyone in our department. On paper, she was senior operations manager. In reality, she was the person everyone learned to avoid eye contact with in the hallway. The thing about Melissa is, if you met her once, you'd think she was great. She was funny, knew everyone's name, always had some story about back when the company was still in one office. But if you worked under her, you saw the other side, the side that used your work like fuel and then made fun of you for smelling like smoke. A typical Monday morning with her looked like this. 9:01 a.m. team meeting on Zoom. She's a few minutes late, camera off. 9:07, camera turns on, full makeup, big smile. So, she says, first of all, huge shout out to me for surviving last week's madness. We all laugh, because you laugh or you become the next thing she rearranges. Then she shares her deck for the executive review. I'm watching the slides I built over the weekend show up one by one. My charts, my notes, my wording. At the bottom it says, prepared by Melissa K. It's not even the theft that gets to you after a while. It's the way she narrates it. I spent the whole weekend restructuring these numbers, she says, rolling her eyes for effect. I swear finance is trying to kill me. I'm muted. I'm always muted in those calls. The first time she took credit for my work, I told myself I didn't care. You're paid to make your boss look good, right? Corporate rule number 1. But it never stopped there. Once she realized I'd swallow that, she started pushing further. It started with small favors. Hey Alex, can you just fix the pivot on that report before the exec review? Alex, I know it's technically marketing's piece, but you're faster with the modeling. Can you just do a version? Then it became normal. I told the VP we'd have the full Q4 forecast scenario by Monday. I know it's Friday night, but you're my reliable guy. The word reliable feels nice the first few times. After the 10th, it starts to sound like expendable. By October, my calendar was a joke. My name was on every spreadsheet, my fingerprints on every process. But whenever someone praised Melissa's team, she'd smile and say, yeah, I push them hard, but that's what good leadership is. The thing that really cracked something in me wasn't even about me. It was about my teammate, Priya. She has 2 kids, one of them still in kindergarten. One Thursday evening, Melissa dropped a new, urgent task at 6:15 p.m. in our team chat. Need this modeled tonight so I can review first thing tomorrow. Non-negotiable. Priya replied, I'm picking up my kids, can do it first thing in the morning. Melissa answered in the public channel, this is why some people stay stuck at mid-level, Priya. Leaders do what it takes when it's needed. No smiley, no JK. Just that, in front of everyone. Priya went quiet. I watched the typing okay bubble show up, disappear, show up again, and then vanish. 15 minutes later, she was in the shared dock, working. Her status on Slack stayed green until almost midnight. That night I sat in front of my laptop long after I'd closed Excel. It's funny how your brain tries to bargain with your conscience. Maybe she's under pressure from above. Maybe she doesn't realize how she sounds. Maybe that's just how managers have to be. But then I remembered that Priya had told Melissa earlier that week that her husband was traveling and she was solo with the kids. I'd watched Melissa nod sympathetically, and still she'd written that message. That wasn't pressure. That was choice. A few days later, the first email about the annual culture and engagement survey landed in our inboxes. In previous years, I'd clicked through it on autopilot. Strongly agree, blah, blah. This time I actually read the questions. I feel respected by my manager. I feel concerns about workload and boundaries are taken seriously. Normally, I would have picked mostly agree, because you never know how anonymous really is. That afternoon, I just sat there with my cursor hovering over the options, hearing Priya's Slack notification ping in my head. I clicked strongly disagree for the first time since I joined the company. At the end, there was a free text field. Is there anything else you'd like to share about your experience with your manager or team? My fingers hovered above the keyboard. This is that moment in every story where people write, and I just started typing and couldn't stop. That's not what happened. I started, stopped, deleted, typed again. I read and reread every sentence, asking myself, if this gets back to her, can I stand by it? Can I prove it? In the end, I wrote 3 short paragraphs. No adjectives, no she's toxic, no emotional language, just facts. On 3 occasions in the last quarter, I completed work where my manager took full formal credit in executive meetings, despite my name being on the files shared internally. I described the Priya incident with dates, cited the message from the channel. I described the voluntary weekend work that somehow always landed on the same 2 people. And then I hit submit. Nothing exploded. No email popped up saying, "How dare you?" The next day was just another day of meetings and spreadsheets, and Melissa making a joke in the team chat about HR, sending yet another survey to justify their existence. 2 weeks later, an invite appeared on my calendar. 30 Mentage, culture and engagement follow-up with HR business partner. I stared at it for a full minute. I could have declined. I could have gone, smiled, said everything was mostly fine, and walked out. That's what the old version of me would have done, the one who thought being quiet and useful was the safest armor. Instead, I accepted. The HRBP Jenna wasn't what I expected. No fake cheerfulness, no we're a family here. She had my engagement scores printed out, a notebook, and one of those faces that doesn't give away anything but isn't cold either. I wanted to follow up on some of your comments, she said. You gave us very specific feedback. Thank you for that. There was no accusation in her voice, which somehow made it worse. It meant I didn't have a villain to push back against, just a professional doing her job. Look, I said, I don't want a witch hunt. I don't think what's happening in our team is sustainable. For anyone. Can you walk me through some examples? So I did. Again, calmly. Dates, names, channels, meetings. I showed her the chat logs with Priya, and the line about some people stay stuck at mid-level. I pointed at the email timestamps on the decks that magically became Melissa's work, before executive meetings. At some point, Jenna put her pen down. Just so you know, she said, you're not the only person who's given us feedback in this direction. That sentence felt like someone opening a window in a room I didn't realize was stuffy. It wasn't just me being too sensitive. There was a pattern. I walked out of that meeting with something I hadn't had in months, the feeling that maybe I wasn't crazy. That night, I did something very undramatic that ended up changing everything. I created a folder on my desktop called Notes. Inside it, I opened a blank document and wrote the date at the top. Then I started listing things. No rants, just entries. What was said, who was there, where it was written. Not because I was plotting revenge. At least that's what I told myself. I just wanted a record, in case anyone ever asked me again. Can you walk me through it? I didn't know it yet, but that was the evening I stopped treating Melissa's behavior as just the way she is, and started treating it like something I was willing to put my name under if it came to a confrontation. By the time the Christmas party rolled around, that little notes folder wasn't so little anymore. By November, something in the team's atmosphere had shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, more like the air pressure dropping before a storm. Melissa hadn't changed her behavior. She was still the same person who wrapped criticism in jokes and pressure in motivational speeches. But the way we received it was different. People were tired. People were paying attention. Or maybe the only thing that changed was me. I wasn't absorbing it anymore. It started with a Tuesday morning meeting. Melissa joined 5 minutes late. Hair perfect, lipstick flawless, glancing at herself in the tiny preview window before unmuting. "Okay, team," she said, clapping her hands. "Let's talk Q4. I reviewed all the scenarios over the weekend and..." I felt my jaw tighten. I had built those scenarios. Every version. I stayed late on Friday and came in early on Monday to finish the sensitivity, modeling she claimed she skimmed on Sunday. She clicked to the next slide, my slide, and continued presenting with that smooth confidence I used to envy. When she finished the deck, she added, "I'll need each of you fully engaged this month. No boundaries, no excuses. This quarter decides next year's promotions." There was a silence, the kind that shouldn't happen in a virtual room with 8 people, but did. Later that day, Priya messaged me privately. "Do you ever feel like she's rewriting reality?" I didn't reply for a full minute, because yes, I did. And for the first time, I had proof of it written down, time-stamped, documented. But that was just the beginning of how quickly things escalated. 2 days later, Melissa pulled me into a 1-1. She shut the door, sat down, crossed her legs, the "I'm about to say something strategic" pose, and smiled. "So, Alex, I want to talk about your future here." Normally, that sentence comes before good news. Not today. "I've noticed," she continued, "a certain rigidity from you lately, some friction, and I need you aligned with me, especially as we move toward restructuring." She let the word hang there. Restructuring. "Restructuring?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She nodded with a slow, almost conspiratorial smile. "I had a very productive conversation with HR last week. A lot is going to change. More ownership for me, more resources, more budget. And I need to know you're with me." There it was, the story she was building in her own head, and she wanted me to help her reinforce it. "What exactly does 'with you' mean?" I asked. She leaned forward. "It means we keep things clean. No unnecessary noise. No airing issues outside the team. HR trusts me. They told me that directly. But they get nervous when people exaggerate workload concerns a beat. You haven't been talking to them, right?" She asked it casually, but her eyes were sharp. I held her gaze. "I answer questions honestly." She smiled, thin and cold. "Careful. Honesty is only helpful when it supports the narrative that moves us forward." I left that meeting understanding 2 things clearly. 1, she suspected someone had spoken up. 2, she assumed HR was on her side, and that assumption was going to cost her. A week later, HR scheduled another follow-up. Jenna wanted more detail around our processes, escalation paths, and how Melissa handled conflict. I gave her everything she asked for, including the timeline of decisions Melissa claimed were team-approved, but were actually unilateral. And then Jenna said something that changed the entire tone of the conversation. "We've conducted additional interviews," she said, tapping her pen, "and there is a consistent pattern across the team. It aligns with what you shared." I didn't say anything at first. I was letting the words settle, letting the meaning crystallize. Pattern meant multiple reports. Pattern meant investigation. Pattern meant consequences. "Just continue documenting," Jenna added. "You're doing the right thing." Walking out of that room, I felt something unfamiliar. Not triumph, not revenge. Something quieter. Relief, maybe. Validation. And yet, Even with everything building behind the scenes, Melissa was getting louder. By mid-November, she started dropping hints in every meeting. When I'm in the new role next year, HR really sees my leadership. The CEO told me he wants stronger management in ops, and we all know who delivers that. It wasn't just confidence, it was certainty. She was so busy rehearsing her own promotion that she didn't notice how people around her had stopped smiling at the comments. One Thursday afternoon, she crossed a line that even she hadn't crossed before. We were prepping a deck for the quarterly business review when she stopped by my desk. "Hey," she said lightly, "before we finalize this, I need you to remove the timestamp metadata and version history." I blinked. "Why?" "I'm presenting this as my proposal. It'll confuse people if they see you authored it. And you know how the VP is. She wants a single point of ownership." "That's not accurate," I said. "This was a team effort." She waved a hand dismissively. "Don't get emotional. You'll get your credit in spirit." In spirit, that was the moment something inside me clicked. Not shattered. Clicked, like a lock turning. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't bad communication. This was intentional, strategic, repeated, and she genuinely thought no one was watching. That night, I updated the notes document. I added timestamps, screenshots, instructions she gave, her phrasing, not to weaponize anything, but because for the first time I understood that this wasn't about surviving her. It was about being ready when the system finally caught up to her. A few days later, my director, the one above Melissa, scheduled a 1-1 with me. He'd never initiated one before. When the call started, he didn't waste time. "I've been talking with HR. We're evaluating structural changes next quarter. I want your honest take. How scalable is the current management style in your team?" He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. I answered him the way I answered HR. Facts, examples, no adjectives. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "Thank you. This aligns with what we're hearing." That's when it hit me. Really hit me. This wasn't just my story anymore. This was a file, a case, a documented pattern moving upward through the company. By the end of November, Melissa was walking around the office like someone already fitted for the crown she thought HR had handed her. She bragged to cross-functional partners about big changes coming and told our team to prepare for new reporting lines. She was right about one thing. Things were about to change, just not the way she imagined. And then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. HR paused her involvement in certain meetings. Our director stopped looping her into planning sessions. The CEO canceled a standing check-in with her. The first time that it ever happened. She didn't notice, but I did. Because once you stop trying to survive someone, you start seeing everything. When December began, I understood one thing clearly. Whatever was going to happen next wasn't in my hands anymore. The wheel was already turning, and Melissa herself had given it the final push. And the Christmas party was waiting. December arrived with that strange mix of exhaustion and adrenaline you only feel in corporate environments. When deadlines are crashing into holidays and everyone pretends things are fine while quietly drowning. But this time, something else sat underneath it all. A vibration, a current, as if the building itself knew a shift was coming. Melissa, of course, was oblivious. She walked through the office like a politician on election week. Bright blazer, confident strides, little comments like, "Big things coming, team. Stay close to me. Visibility matters." Or, my personal favorite, "HR and I are basically building the new structure together." She believed every word, and maybe that was the saddest part. Or the funniest, depending on how you looked at it. All the clues were already on the table. The canceled meetings, the unreturned Slack messages, the fact that our director had started holding planning sessions without her. But she didn't see any of it. The week before the Christmas party, she called another team meeting. She was radiant, almost glowing, as if she'd already been promoted and was just waiting for the world to catch up to her fantasy. "So," she began, lowering her voice for the dramatic effect. I've spoken to HR again. Next year is going to look very different. We're finally getting the structure we deserve. More control, more leadership, more influence. No one asked what she meant. She didn't notice. Then she looked right at me. And Alex will, of course, play a key supporting role during the transition. Supporting role? I didn't react. I didn't need to. Priya shot me a look across the call, something between disbelief and sympathy, but I kept my expression neutral. Ever since the investigation started, I had learned to keep my face as still as a photograph. Later that day, I saw something that confirmed how close we were to the breaking point. I passed by the HR floor, not accidentally, but not suspiciously either. And through the glass walls, I saw Jenna and my director in a closed-room meeting. Laptops open, papers on the table, neutral expressions. But there was a seriousness there that you could feel even through glass. And then I saw a third person walk in, the chief people officer. That was when I understood. Whatever decision they were finalizing, it wasn't small. 3 days before the party, Melissa held a prep call for the Q4 business review. Her tone was sharp, impatient. Alex, I need the revised forecast tonight. No excuses. I want to share it with the VP tomorrow morning. Tomorrow's the final leadership sync, I reminded her. The VP will already have the... She cut me off. Don't argue. Just do it. I stared at her, unable to ignore the irony. She was giving me orders for a meeting she had no idea she'd been quietly excluded from. But I did the work, not for her, but because I refused to let her drag me down with her. The numbers were immaculate, clean, unassailable. I sent them before midnight. The next morning, she walked past my desk without even acknowledging the file. She looked irritated, as if something in her perfect plan wasn't aligning. I found out why later. Our director pulled the team into a quick call. Tomorrow's review is leadership only. Just a heads up that you won't need to join. Melissa blinked. Wait, what? I always join. He didn't flinch. Not this time. She laughed, assuming it was a joke. When no one laughed with her, her smile froze. I recognized that look, the tiny crack in certainty. But she patched it over quickly, telling herself whatever story she needed to stay upright. And then came the night of the Christmas party. The venue was a converted warehouse, exposed brick, fairy lights, those overpriced catering trays with tiny skewers no one really likes, but eats anyway. People were already tipsy. Music was loud. The CEO and HR were positioned near the stage, talking in low voices. I arrived with 2 colleagues. The moment we walked in, we saw Melissa standing near the front in a red dress, holding a glass of champagne like it was a royal scepter. She was positioning herself close to the microphone, waiting for the CEO to begin the yearly speech. She wasn't scheduled to speak, but of course that wasn't going to stop her. When the CEO stepped away for a moment, she seized the opening, tapped her champagne glass with a spoon, and called out, "Everyone, a quick toast!" Conversations quieted, glasses lifted. Someone turned down the music. Melissa smiled, wide, rehearsed, triumphant. "This year," she began, "has been challenging, but next year is going to be our breakthrough. HR has given me everything I need. Resources, authority, full structural support. We're about to elevate this department like never before." I watched her face as she said it, the pride, the excitement, the absolute confidence that the universe was aligning exactly as she imagined. Then I looked at the CEO. His smile didn't fade. It simply flattened, hardened at the edges, a microscopic shift, but unmistakable. Jenna looked down for a second, tapping her finger against her glass. The chief people officer exhaled through her nose in a way that was almost a flinch. I felt a chill go through me, and so did the room. Because the silence that followed her speech wasn't admiration, it was anticipation. When the CEO finally stepped up to the microphone, he didn't comment on her toast. He didn't mention her name. He simply thanked everyone. made a few jokes about holiday traffic, and then shifted into the formal announcement. As many of you know, leadership and HR conducted a thorough review of our organizational structure this quarter. We identified several areas where we need clearer processes, better communication, and stronger alignment. Melissa straightened, smiling, waiting for her moment of coronation. The CEO continued. As part of this reorganization, the operations manager role, in its current form, will be sunset. Her smile cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but it was there. We will be transitioning certain responsibilities to the strategy division and creating a new role. Operations lead, with a focus on transparency, team development, and cross-functional accountability. She froze. I didn't, because I knew what was coming next. I'd earned it, step by step, quietly, without theatrics. And I'm proud to announce that this new role will be filled by someone who has consistently demonstrated integrity, clarity, and leadership under pressure. He paused. The room held its breath. Alex Thompson. Applause erupted. Not explosive, but genuine. I felt hands patting my back, someone squeezing my shoulder. I saw Priya smiling at me with something between relief and gratitude. Melissa didn't move. Her champagne glass slipped a little in her grip. She didn't look angry. Not yet. She looked confused, as if reality had suddenly shifted a few inches to the left and she hadn't found her footing. The CEO finished outlining the structural changes. HR added that transitions would begin immediately and that all impacted employees had already been contacted privately. That was a lie. They had emailed her 30 minutes before the party started. She just hadn't checked. When the formal part ended, people scattered back to conversations. Music rose again. The party resumed, but not for her. She walked toward HR, toward the CEO, toward anyone who might explain what had just happened. Every step she took, her face tightened, spiraling from confusion to shock to disbelief. I didn't follow. I didn't intervene. I didn't need to. Because the truth was simple. She hadn't been blindsided. She had been warned by the numbers, by the meetings she was excluded from, by the patterns she ignored, by the people she dismissed. She just refused to see it, and now the consequences had finally arrived. Later that night, as people danced and yelled over the music, I slipped outside for air. Cold December wind hit my face, grounding me. Inside, the chaos was unfolding. But outside, under the quiet winter sky, I felt something entirely different. Justice, not loud, not vindictive, but earned. The Monday after the Christmas party felt strangely quiet, as if the entire office had exhaled something it didn't realize it had been holding. People nodded at me in the hallway with this subtle, careful reassurance. Not celebratory, not awkward, just respectful. Not because I'd been promoted, but because everyone knew what had led to it. Melissa didn't come in that day. By noon, HR sent an email to the team. As part of the transition, Melissa will be taking accrued leave until further notice. It was the standard phrasing companies use during offboarding: neutral, clean, uninformative. But everyone understood what it meant. The formal process had already begun. Her access to certain internal systems was revoked. Calendar permissions switched. Her management rights in our shared drives disappeared overnight. None of this was dramatic. It was procedural. Corporate endings rarely come with fireworks, just a series of quiet, irreversible clicks. That afternoon, Jenna from HR scheduled a meeting with me. She congratulated me on the new role, but in that steady, serious way HR has when the celebration is secondary to the transition. We talked through responsibilities, documentation, how to handle team support during the shift. Near the end of the call, she said, "I want you to know the decision wasn't based on one person's report. It was a full pattern. You helped us understand it clearly. It wasn't flattery. It wasn't validation. It was context. The kind HR gives only when the process is final and the risk is gone. When the meeting ended, I sat there for a minute, just breathing. For the first time since joining the company, I felt like the ground under my feet wasn't shifting constantly. The next week was a blur of 1.1s with the team. I met with everyone, Priya first. She walked into the conference room looking nervous, then immediately relaxed when she saw me. "You're going to be a good manager," she said. Not like a compliment, more like a fact. I didn't tell her how much that meant. I just outlined the plan. Stable workloads, no more last-minute Friday emergencies, transparency on credit, predictable boundaries, real processes, no more chaos disguised as leadership. She nodded, almost relieved. Other team members echoed the same thing in different words. People didn't want revenge. They didn't want someone to punish Melissa. They wanted someone who wouldn't treat empathy like a weakness. Our director met with me later that week. He wasn't the type to praise easily. "You handled this professionally," he said. "That matters. More than you know." I understood exactly what he meant. Companies don't promote people to reward suffering. They promote people who can be trusted when things fall apart. And Melissa was falling apart. On Thursday, I saw her for the first time since the party. She came into the office briefly to meet with HR, probably to finalize her severance agreement. She looked smaller somehow, not defeated, but disoriented, like someone who had woken up in a version of her life she didn't recognize. She saw me as she headed to the elevator. For a moment, she hesitated, long enough that I knew she wanted to say something. Apologize, accuse, bargain, I'll never know. She pressed the elevator button, waited in silence, stepped inside, and didn't look back. Some endings don't need words. By the following Monday, HR sent out the updated org chart. My name sat where hers once had, with a new title underneath. The role she believed she was walking into, the one she'd bragged about, didn't exist for her now. It existed for someone who actually supported the team she'd drained. There were no celebrations, no office-wide applause, just a quiet acknowledgement that the department had needed a reset, and it finally got one. The first real moment of stillness came a week later. I stayed late in the office to finish planning Q1 objectives. At some point, I glanced at the whiteboard, still cluttered with Melissa's old scribbles, half-finished diagrams, motivational quotes written in thick marker, arrows pointing to nowhere. I stood up, grabbed the eraser, and wiped everything away. All of it, clean slate. Then I wrote 3 simple lines: clear goals, honest communication. No one works alone, nothing profound, nothing inspiring enough to frame. Just the rules I needed. The rules I wished we'd had from the beginning. When I stepped back from the board, the room felt lighter. Later, as I walked out of the office, the hallway empty and the building humming quietly like a machine resetting itself, a realization settled over me. Not triumphant, not vengeful, just true. I hadn't destroyed Melissa. I hadn't plotted against her or pulled strings behind the scenes. I had simply stopped protecting her from the consequences of her own behavior. And the system, once it had the full picture, did what systems are designed to do when leadership fails. It replaced her. Outside, the cold air hit my face, sharp and clean. I zipped my coat, stepped into the December night, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Real peace. Not the quiet of endurance, but the quiet that comes after a storm has passed and the world finally stops shaking. And for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying anyone else's chaos on my shoulders. I was just walking home,